Okay, so welcome again. I hope you have enjoyed so many good sessions. Love Kevin Nolan, love Rita, Tony, Martin Reeves. I hope you had enjoyed this session as well. So for those joining right now, so welcome to the Beyond Hierarchy Summit. Now we are moving to people with skin in the game, people that are there in the companies, in the organizations, fighting for transformation. So I would love to invite here three great members of the Outthinker Strategy Network. So Michelle Micon, that is Vice President of Innovation and Strategic Service at the Boston Globe Media. Rich Haas, Vice President Business Model Innovation at Kyndryl, that is the formerly IBM's Infrastructure Services business. And Adam Zalisk, Senior Vice President at Amplify. So uh, before we start with questions about the topic, I would love to get 1 minute of each of you so you can explain a bit your business, for those that don't know it. So let me start with Michelle. Michelle, if you could quickly explain what Boston Globe Media does.
Sure. The Boston Globe Media has a couple of different properties in their portfolio. Of course, Boston Globe, which most people know. It's 150 years old this year, actually. Boston.com and Stat News, and a recently launched product called the B-Side. So
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. So Adam, if you could explain Amplify to our guests here.
Of course. Good to see you, Claudio, and Michelle and Rich. So Amplify Education is an education technology company. We're a next generation curriculum and assessment company. We build rich instructional products that are anchored in evidence-based practice about how to teach science, English, and mathematics. And we're serving around 10 million students around the country and increasingly around the world.
Thank you so much, Adam. So Rich, your time to explain.
Yeah, my apologies if I go over by a little bit. And it's a pleasure being part of this discussion. So as Claudio mentioned, my name is Rich Haas. I'm the global leader for business model innovation at Kyndryl. And if you haven't heard of Kyndryl, no worries. We're a relatively young company, but have an extended heritage. Claudio mentioned we're the former infrastructure services business of IBM. And I always joke around a little bit by saying we're a startup with a revenue of about $18 billion, more than 4,000 customers, 90,000 employees spread across 63 different countries. Doesn't sound like a startup, but in essence, we have that startup mentality, having spun out of IBM back at the tail end of last year for multiple different reasons, which we'll probably get into here. But that spin out, in essence, presages and sort of underscores the importance of that thinking around young company, new company, startup type mentality.
No, that's great. That's good. Thank you. Thank you for making that. So that makes easier to get the guests here and understand what you do. So first question is, we have all these big insights here, zero distance from clients, make the internal functions of an organization functioning like more marketplace, business ecosystems where you have these kind of partners and alliance, whatever, to offer a better experience for customers and clients. So it looks like all fascinating. A lot of innovation happening in the enterprise level. So suppose I'm a chief strategy officer and executive trying to make this transformation. So where should I start? And I would love to, of course, base that on your personal experience. It's not easy. We know that. It's very challenging to making transformation for organizations that are there operating in one mindset. But where should I start? So let me start with you, Rich. You're the last one to introduce yourself. Let's go first with you, and we go to Michelle and Adam.
Yeah, sure. And my apologies if I go a little bit long-winded on this one. I think it's a very important question. I think it really starts first and foremost with clarity around the need for a different approach. Basically, in my mind, sort of answering three general questions that help steer the thinking. The first question really is, how quickly is innovation happening in your market? The second question really gets to what's driving the innovation. And the third question is really around, where is innovation coming from? And the answers to those questions can help inform how you move forward and where to start. So, for instance, if a market is undergoing rapid innovation, then you may not have the luxury of time. You'll need to move much more quickly, maybe more quickly than you're comfortable with moving. If innovation is coming through new technology, then you'll have to gear yourself around either the investments or partnerships to provide that innovation that's demanded in the marketplace. And if innovation is customer-led, you need to get ahead of that or intersect with it in some fashion. Otherwise, the customers will outpace you. Now, if I reflect sort of to my own experience for Kyndryl, we're coming from that environment where we were a captive entity within a larger technology firm, IBM. That worked when speed of technological change, in essence, was relatively moderate. We could wrap our services around technology or a technology set offered predominantly from one company. Now, the market changed, though, in some pretty profound ways. And when I say market, the technology underpinnings and the market dynamics changed quite a bit. You get a proliferation of technologies that our customers were adopting and are dealing with and trying to get help with. You have a rapid change in major market themes, such as the move to public cloud, edge computing, other things. And simply put, if I reflect on sort of our own experience, we needed freedom of action to provide the services around those technology stacks that best served our customers' needs, as well as innovation in a more distributed way. So we needed to make that sort of classic shift almost, or pivot from an integrated model to a federated model. And through our spin-out from IBM, we're able to do that and establish those partnerships with the world's leading technology firms. So I think it's really first and foremost getting clarity on sort of those three questions at the outset. Identify how quickly innovation and change is happening in your marketplace, and then internalize that for your organization to understand what changes do you need to make in order to be able to be relevant to your customers and in the marketplace.
No, I love it. I love it. It connects with what Martin Reeves say, that is, you need to understand the context. Not necessarily you need to have very innovative organic model. Sometimes bureaucracy can happen depending the context that you are. So let's go to Michelle. Michelle, what you bring him in, what would be your advice in this sense?
My advice, and where I've had some experiences, if there's a desire for innovation and it can be sometimes hard to figure out a larger strategy for it, I think what Rich said is spot on. My experience is if you're starting really small and you're okay taking some of those risks and don't have all the answers, is just to start, because start but keep it close. Sort of what has worked in my career is working on projects where there's a really small list of stakeholders or a venture committee or however you want to call it. But if somebody internally, say in a company, has an idea, let them run with it and learn from there how you want to interact, how you want to resource, how wide to spread the news when something happens. Every organization's so different, and it's hard to figure out that stuff out at the very beginning. So in the early stages, kind of let it be really organic, but notice and communicate and be open to what's happening to try to learn for the second time and the third time what worked and what didn't. So while it can be really important to figure out as much as you can early on, I find that starting just gets it going. And then other people see innovation happening and want to jump on the bandwagon. And I think there's some benefits to that.
Okay, no, that's good. That's good. Thank you. So let's go to Adam. Adam, how do you complement your colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, so much to agree with in what Rich and Michelle said. I think they've given a really terrific description of how to sort of size the initiative to the needs of the organization and the industry you're operating in. The only thing I'd add is that I think when kicking off this kind of effort, it's so often useful to think about what is the limiting factor that's going to determine our success or not. And in these cases, it strikes me our ability to articulate the need in broad theoretical terms is probably not going to be the limiting factor. Even our ability to get senior executives and colleagues bought in, that may take some work. But the real limiting factor, and as I listened to the session that came before this one, strikes me as the actual protagonists, the talent that is ready to bring entrepreneurialism, energy, curiosity, velocity to projects, in a way that is going to galvanize their colleagues and create proof points of a new way of working. And so the only thing I'd add to the way that Rich and Michelle outlined first steps is that it strikes me that one of the most important first steps is to improve our own capability for identifying and harvesting that talent, the people in the organization who can be the real successful protagonists behind these initiatives.
I love that. I mean, the limiting factors. So I tell quickly one experience that I had in my previous job, in some jobs that I had in the past. That was we need to become more innovative. There was like a new organization design that was put in place, and that gave more autonomy to small like business units that were like the same company, but they gave like, okay, this market here or this region here, so you have more autonomy, you should work like this. And there was a lot of training, instrumentalization, how they could work together, and things started running. And 6 months later, we were coming back to see the evolution. It was almost nothing, almost nothing. And at the end, we did a lot of investigation till one day someone said something to us that say, hey, it looks like we are still waiting for the others to come from the top. And that comes to me, the thing about like organizational culture, that is, people are so used with the hierarchy. We're so used to easily get the others and know what to do in their jobs, that it was difficult to change. It's funny because before that they were complaining about autonomy. I want more autonomy, and autonomy was given, but nothing really happened. So I would love to explore with you. I mean, there is this big topic of organizational culture. People are used to do things in the same way. So how we should think that? That's usually a very big limiting factor. You give more protagonism, but sometimes it's difficult to get that moving. How do you react to that? So let's start again. I mean, Michelle, maybe you first this time.
I think that what I would say is it's often finding an idea. I hear you. I think sometimes it can be that you have the desire, but you can't change the behavior that quickly. I think it's about, in my experience, if people are rallied around an idea that has some energy, and there's even just one person that's willing to kind of step out, it can create momentum. The other thing that has worked is, if you're not seeing movement because the culture maybe doesn't permit it, or this is new, is trying a couple different meeting types, or one-on-one sessions with that person to help kind of get it started. I hope I'm answering your question directly, but I think it's kind of that grassroots, like we have to try something different. So if a normal kickoff meeting doesn't work, we got to try, how do we meet with that person, a protagonist or multiple protagonists, and find out what the barriers are. Do they just need encouragement, or they need permission? Everybody's wired a little differently. So I think it's that kind of one-on-one interaction in some cases to find out what is the barrier and trying to.
Yeah. I love that, because sometimes we kind of like have this waterfall mindset to implement things, that is, it's all at once. We change everything. Everybody had a new thing, but there was no maybe moving force, an example or something that could help them. But I would love to hear you too as well. I mean, let's go, Adam. How do you react to this situation? What would you recommend?
When we're trying to make these changes, I feel like all the risk is on the side of not being specific enough about the behaviors that we want to change.
Yep.
And sometimes I think we avoid that because the behavior changes can seem quite mundane, can also feel quite scary because they deviate so profoundly from what we're used to. And so, I think forcing us to go from the terms of concept, entrepreneur, decentralized innovation, to the specific changes that we want to see our colleagues and team members make behaviorally. How you're used to starting a project by building this multi-year forecast and rolling out an NPV and comparing it to our hurdle. Don't do any of that this time. Or even at the level of, how you're used to spending 25% of your time providing visibility about this project to executives and ensuring that all of our functional areas are bought in and consulting them. you know what, we're giving you freedom within these parameters to not do any of that and to reclaim that 20% of your time. Those may not even be specific enough. I think the more precise we can be about the changes that we're giving our colleagues the opportunity to take on, the more likely we are to actually see those.
Yeah, no, I see that. I think sometimes you need to go to a level of granularity that people can, oh, I know now, I do now, I can try now. So, Rich, how's been your experience? I mean, you are in the middle of like a big transformation. It's just the fact of getting off the IBM structure is a big one, but love to hear you.
Yeah, and totally agree with Adam's comments in terms of, oftentimes we find ourselves not being specific enough in the type of changes we want in the behaviors. Just to add to the comments that both Michelle and Adam have made, naturally, culture is a very important piece to any sort of transition and any sort of change program that you have. You can't just put structures like internal marketplaces in place or move to a decentralized model and then say to folks, all right, everyone, be more innovative, lead the change. It just doesn't work that way. To a degree, people are conditioned by their past collective behavior. There obviously needs to be a focus in terms of the hearts and minds of winning people over, in essence. Part of that has to do as well with being specific and enabling people to see sort of their futures in the transition and in the future state that you're trying to get to. And importantly, you want to ensure that you can encourage people in distributed environments to take the initiative. At Kyndryl, the way we're doing this is through a sustained culture transformation and a set of behaviors that we call the Kyndryl way, where we have several key tenets and elements. Some of those, just to mention them, are around restless to continuously anticipate, learn, and innovate, or being flat to empower accountability and operate as an inclusive team. And that has to be continuously reinforced, as well as ensuring that you have champions in your organization that you can point to, that you can, in essence, say, this is what our future is supposed to be like in terms of the behaviors, so that people can model those behaviors to a degree. But completely agree with a comment in terms of oftentimes, we're not specific enough, and that's a general statement. The greater we can be in terms of a degree of specificity on how people's lives will change and the behaviors that we want to move towards, the better. Hey, Claudia, I think you're on mute.
So sorry. Yeah, sometimes you just get distracted. So there is another component of like this big change that I've seen a lot in literature and in real life as well, in real case. That is, one thing is definitely the culture. You need to get people engaged in moving to the new behaviors. But another thing is that there is a learning curve. There is a learning curve that takes time sometimes. So for example, another situation that I saw that we were like, hey, people, the model is not delivering. So when we went to see people, it was just that they were not getting used yet. I mean, it takes time. They were receiving training until you get back to like extract the productivity level that the new model is supposed to bring. Takes some time. And when you talk about innovation, or we talk about like more organic models, that is even more difficult because it's abstract. Usually the outcomes of this model comes sometimes years, after that. So. And we have investors, shareholders, all like trying to see what's coming. How do you see that? I mean, do you usually bring like this time perspective to projects that you're implementing? Do you bring like, hey, how long will you expect people to come? And that eventually will mean lower productivity as people are learning to get there, just to see how you react to that. So we can go with Adam and again, go back to Michelle. Yep.
I feel like there's a kind of qualitative and a quantitative angle on that, Claudio.
Yep.
The quantitative angle in my mind is we need to be extremely clear with all of our stakeholders about the risk parameters that we're establishing in taking on these new practices. There's kind of a capital allocation question of how much are we putting against very nascent and speculative efforts, and and recognizing publicly that in changing these behaviors, we may not seek to change them first in our more mature, large-scale projects where there's significant customer commitments and a higher risk profile and visibility. So I think the first step in gaining comfort and alignment is being very clear on the risk trade-offs that we're making in a way that we can quantify. I think there's then a second step, which is how is this just going to feel different? And especially for executives who are used to a polished presentation, who are used to a detailed business plan before we press go on the first prototype, who are accustomed to a set of behaviors that may look more like the old culture than the one that we are trying to embody. I think we need to be specific and honest about how these changes are going to feel different in the day-to-day, and provide, instead of saying, well, all of that is going away, provide a replacement to it that shows the discipline of projects, but perhaps enables them to be more decentralized and autonomous. What are the stage gates you can expect? When's the next time you're going to hear from this team? What are they testing right now, and what would success look like in 3 months? So I would take it both from the angle of what is at risk financially and how are we being intentional about those choices, and from the perspective of how is just the way we work together going to feel different, and how can we anticipate those changes going forward?
No, love it. Michelle, how do you react to that? And one thing is one specific just to add here, that is, it looks like there is a supporting system required to these things. Just want to hear from you, Michelle.
I do think there's a supporting system needed. I also, just to answer your initial question, think that it is good to approximate a date by which you want something to happen, whether it's a month or a year or 2 years, whatever, mostly so that it continues to happen and there continues to be momentum and you're sending a signal that it's important. But patience and flexibility are really important there, particularly if it's something that's never been done before. You might have to change those time expectations wildly. So, for example, if there's a group meeting about a status on a project, just along the lines of what Adam was saying about the feeling of the project and how it feels different, reminding people that there's patience and flexibility needed, which might be different than a normal sort of rigid calendar that one follows. You probably have to remind people of that every time, because their default is going to be how the company normally operates, and this might feel really different. And that feeling is important so that people are kind of filtering their thoughts and ideas differently than they normally would, which is sort of the power of this whole entrepreneurial idea within a larger ecosystem. I don't know if I answered your last question.
No, yes, my last question is, because there is a personal struggle, to make this movement, and even for example, I can tell about myself how I felt when I was sometimes in my career, and is, hey, okay, I need to change that. I need people maybe is patient about the change that I need, but I still think that they're observing me and kind of judging me, and that of course affect my career, affect my expectations to move. So it's all about should we have this supporting system reinforcing? How do you make sure that people are evolving, but we are observing and helping them to do that? Yes.
I think that support system, let me just add one thought. I think that support system is needed. It might be a different support system than what normally goes on. So I worked on a project once where the person didn't sit in the core function, but they had this fantastic idea. So while we might take for granted they know what resources to go to answer a problem, I think we had to, the internal innovation team really had to connect those dots for this individual to say, this is a resource and this is a resource, because they just weren't aware of it. And sometimes in working on an entrepreneurial project, you take for granted the whole company's there to help, but they might not have those connections. So I think introducing those elements when you see them is important.
Okay. No, thank you. So, Rich, how do you respond to the same question?
Yeah, so I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record. My apologies, folks.
No
But I
problem.
think I really think it gets down to, in some respects, clarity on two things, which are metrics and timeframes. Regarding metrics, there may be several top-level metrics that are the same across your current and future models, but there will likely be some key ones in essence that are different, and that's something really where a lot of thought has to be put into. What's really different on the future model, on the future state you're trying to get to, and what are the metrics that in essence reflect that, different from the model you have today. On timeframes, I think it's important to set realistic expectations. That's not novel. I think everyone will agree with that. It's rare that big changes sort of have an immediate positive impact. If they do, you take them. But it's rare that the big changes that you have in your companies and your corporations will have that immediate impact. We need to be honest when we set those expectations. If it takes 1 to 2 years for a change, we should put that out there. The clock starts ticking in essence, and we have something of a grace period where we can do the heavy lifting to get to our goals. I think the other point as well to pick up on something that Michelle had mentioned, as you're going through that sort of change, there needs to be greater tolerance for potential missteps as you transition. Mistakes happen. Fix them locally, then apply the learnings globally. Otherwise, if there's not tolerance, if there's a lack of tolerance, the negative stimulus tends to stick with people and organizations. So the next time you try a change, people are going to ask themselves, why should I stick my neck out? I'll do what I did for the last however many years because it's safe. And that's exactly the behavior that you don't want to have happen. So there's a need in essence for tolerance around mistakes. Like I say, fix them locally, apply the learnings globally, and then move forward.
Okay, love it. There's a point here, a question. Let me see if I show that from Kevin that is watching us. So, is there a notion of truly autonomous innovation project teams? He feels that there is a need for a steering committee that provides support to the project teams, even if the most agile teams or decentralized organization. So the question is, where in the organization should that governance and support layer belong? So that's what Kevin is asking us. It's connected with like this autonomy alignment that Martin Reeves was commenting. I would love to hear from you. How do you see that? Because more and more we see organizations experimenting, trying to innovate, trying new things. But how do you give more autonomy to people as well, so they can innovate close to the client? In this sense of zero distance from the client. How do we see governance playing a role here in your experience? So what would be your recommendations? So Michelle, you first this time.
My experience with this is that innovation teams or support teams in this case that sit independently from any other functional group and can sort of work with anyone. That's been my experience. I haven't worked with a lot of other models, but I will say it's worked well because there's a degree of, they have some stake in it. They have a stake in the learning and the success of the experiment, but not necessarily in the functional piece or wherever the function sits, where the idea is coming from. So, and there's a value to that innovation team applying the same logic to multiple projects so that the company can learn. So I think I'm answering it, but my experience is that when it sits independently and can kind of plug into any group, that has worked in my experience.
Okay. So, Rich, how do you react to that? Governance is always an important stuff. And I have a following question after that regarding the same topic, but let's hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I picked up on a phrase in the question as well, sort of the layer of coordination. Where does that plug in appropriately? And that's really, dependent on what that project is, what that initiative is. Obviously a corporation needs to be able to align its resources and provide the appropriate resources for the projects that are going to have the maximum amount of impact. So there's a degree of prioritization there. If you're talking about a project that has, for instance, a broad impact, broad scope, but as well the other consideration in this is to think through how the rest of the organization is going to react. The layer of coordination may be fairly high in the company, where there's key senior leaders who may understand the projects that are going on and is able to allocate resources as necessary, but it's not known by the broader corporation for many different reasons. If you're talking about sort of an individual project, an innovation project that you're running, with potentially a customer specifically, where the bounds and the scope of what's being innovated around, or the topic that's being innovated around, there could be broader participation across the organization, and the role really of that layer of coordination is much further down in the corporation. But I think one key piece in here as well is, oftentimes when I reflect on sort of past experience, this question comes up in terms of how will the rest of the organization react to the project that you launch. You can almost think of almost an organism, and almost T cells and antibodies. If it's anathema to what the rest of the corporation is doing, you can imagine that the rest of the corporation is sort of going to fight it a little bit. But if it's the direction really that the corporation is supposed to move in that represents the future state, you have to nurture it, you have to protect it in a way as well, give it the resources that it needs, the project the resources that it needs, but make sure that you're also protecting it from those antibodies and T cells, making sure that you can actually prove out the idea before exposing it too broadly. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was connecting that with the first point that Adam made about the kind of immunity system, the limiting factors, in the organization. And I was wondering if like governance could eventually become, not become, but be one of them, because they're also used with like old mindsets, old way of tracking things and, milestones. Sometimes when you're trying innovation, new business models, there's a lot of abstraction that you're not sure. You have assumptions, hypotheses. So, but coming back, Adam, how do you connect this piece? I think Rich brought a piece of that. What is the challenge with governance?
This might be a little bit of a synthesis of what Michelle and Rich said, really, but I think, of course, the specifics of the right structure are contextual to the organization and its size and the initiative and all of that. But what we can probably say in general is that we want the lightest weight governance solution that addresses the problems that we need governance to address for the initiative, and I think those are one, clarity of purpose. So we need to be giving our teams the broad compass for what we believe as an organization will create value for our customers and therefore for the enterprise. We need to provide resources in a fast, agile way when they're needed. And then we need to provide the visibility within the broader organization so that when and if the initiative is successful, it can kind of step ladder to the next stage of resource and development. And if we can do those three things, then the lightest weight way of doing them with the least involvement and kind of risk of bureaucracy or distraction for the team that we've tasked with this innovation project feels like the right solution to me.
No, I really like that. Summarizing here, it looks like to me that there is a shift here that is we don't expect the governance structure just to come to audit me and control me and see if I'm reaching to targets, but I want them to have a very important function here to help us understand where we are and give support sometimes with resource, with ideas, with whatever that is necessary to move through the direction of this purpose that is clear. Is that make sense? Clarity of purpose in the supportive system, that governance is part of that. Does it make sense? Yeah, that's good. That's good. So there's another question here, and that's a very interesting question. I will try to brief. I mean, Vitaly is suggesting here. So how do we shift beliefs in mindset fast in that scale? I mean, I will just give you a quick opinion and see how you react to that. That sometimes my sensation is that there is a confusion about agility. That is agility. You have like a process that makes you get to stage faster, but not necessarily means that the speed are in the micro time, micro period. Can you understand what I'm saying? Sometimes it's longer, but it's the fast path to get to the results. So there is, for me, this confusion of like being agile and fast, but against like the against like speed, if you can understand me, speed in the sense that, you need to execute for today. Can you understand what I say? So how do you react to this question? I mean, how do you shift beliefs on mindset in fast and scale and bring like this point that I bring here, that is agile maybe is, or what we want in organizations more like a process that gets us faster to a place, not necessarily saying that people need to execute quickly or so on and so forth, because there's a learning, so on and so forth. So Rich, starting with you, I mean, how do you react to this question?
Yeah, so I think we already talked a lot about sort of clarity of purpose, metrics, timeframes, and so on. The thought I'd add to that is really, in order to have this sort of be a self-sustaining, fast process, we also need to think about this from the perspective of being able to build in the opportunity for quick wins and celebrate those wins when they happen. There's a certain momentum around wins that almost becomes infectious. And I've been mentioning T cells and antibodies, now infection. I did not study biology, by the way. But when people see glimmers of the future, it can produce a positive feedback mechanism where more people want to be part of the change, and it sort of starts creating this snowball effect of more people get involved, more people move quickly, have ideas, and then basically iterate. And that sort of quick wins by being able to build a project or a large scale transformation that embeds quick wins and then celebrates those quick wins, in essence helps to speed along the process as well, because people start seeing what does the future look like, and they start feeling good about where that future is going.
Love it. Yes. No, I love this idea of like having the quick wins and connect with that. So Michelle, what would you bring here as well?
I mean, sort of information and application is what I've seen work. So it's one thing to, read about all the application, all the things that artificial intelligence can do for us, but to find, if possible, a closer an example of how something's worked in your industry or a business that's like yours, I feel like in my experience has been able to get people to believe that not only can it be done, it can be done by us as this type of organization. I realize that's not always possible if you're innovating on something pretty far out there, but most innovation in my experience is closer in. And so sometimes there's an example that can show people that it's possible, and then it's a matter of making it your own and changing the culture of the company to still execute it. But any examples that are even remotely relevant can be helpful to make people understand that things are possible in practical terms.
Oh, I love that. I mean, examples are like instructive, like in the sense of like giving a real case, so people can mirror themselves and big questions. Yeah, I love that. Yes. And Adam, anything to add here to this question?
I would just say, again, telling people exactly what we expect, getting as clear on the behaviors so that we can call each other on when we're doing them or not doing them. And then what I hear in part of what Michelle and Rich just said is a practice of really vivid storytelling about where those behaviors have been applied in ways that have created value for the company. Yeah. And I think that's actually easier said than done. Like there's real communications work that's required to make sure that our leaders and executives are telling those stories in the same way time and again, and connecting them back to the very specific behaviors that we want to see one another do. And I think the more that we can drive that flywheel of positive example and specific takeaway, the more that we can, again, call each other on when we're doing it in practice or not.
No, I agree. And this storytelling piece is, I think, is very important. In some conversation we had recently in your network, I mean, that was an important topic. That was how we are not trained into storytelling. I mean, to involve people through storytelling. So, and I want to bring like this point of storytelling because one usually big struggle that we discussed through the network is about like shareholders. So independently, if you're like a family owned or a private owned, like private equity or kind of any kind of arrangement, or a public, that's sometimes is even more difficult. One big challenge is convincing people with diverse set of expectations that we are trying something that will make a huge difference. So we've seen in the past a lot of organizations going private, one ownership to make that shift. We've seen some recently as well. But shareholders usually is a very important component where we need to tell a very good story to change. I mean, how has been your experience here? I mean, without then sometimes shifts, like this one that we saw at G Appliance, or those that we had a conversation with the Rita, Tony, and Martin, are very difficult. How's been your experience? How are your recommendations how to connect with shareholders and sell them this story that we want to deliver to get more autonomy, more like innovation, and move forward. So, Rishi, do you mind to start?
Yeah, sure. So I think first and foremost, you have to define who the stakeholders and shareholder audiences are that you're trying to communicate this. Then I think it goes back to a lot of what we've been talking about. I love the idea of the focus on storytelling. It's important to be able to have that clarity of vision where you're trying to get to, what the purpose is, and then what the role of the individual is within that sort of effort. And then along the way, there are going to be those moments of truth, of when you have, to use the words earlier, quick wins, of instances where you can show positive examples of the change. And as you do that for each one of the constituencies and articulate that in that storytelling, you can back up sort of the vision, the descriptions that you've had at the outset with actual proof points to say, hey, these are examples of where we're changing, where we're making progress, what we're doing. And then that feeds into the thought of once you're able to actually show that you're making a positive change, positive trajectory, more people will believe in that change and want to be part of it for the success of the company.
Yeah, I love like Tony is chatting here with us, Tony O'Driscoll, and he says, hey, we need both story and science to drive change. He says Martin Luther King did not say, I have a plan. He shared, I dream that could find this everything. So Adam, how do you react like to this relationship with shareholders and how to get them on board in the change that you need?
Well, we've talked a lot about forward-looking stories and examples of once we kick off the initiative, what are the proof points and the quick wins,
Yep.
To Rich's point. I'd also take us backwards. In any organization, we can find examples of folks who have nurtured impressive entrepreneurial projects, endeavors, and we can find examples of promising projects that have faltered. And I think often one of the most vivid ways to define the conditions we want to create in the organization for entrepreneurial, innovative activities like the ones we're talking about in this conversation are to look at those two examples. What went right in terms of who the individual was leading the project and how they were managed and supported and engaged by the organization when it's really worked, and the flip set of questions where it hasn't. And I think that can give us a platform for change and a clarity about what we're doing that's rooted sort of not in theory, but in real examples and people and things that we've seen among our colleagues.
No, I love that. And Michelle, anything to add here?
I think what I would add is when your initial prompt made me think literally of publicly traded companies and how they have paid shareholders that have invested their money. And, typically a shareholder events, there's very concrete results being shared. And often in innovation projects, particularly early on, my experience is there isn't, of course, if there are quick wins, great, share them, but also it could be a matter of saying, we don't have the stats yet to share, but we want to share the vision, and then using, to the point of storytelling, different devices to do that, to sort of change the expectation that it's not going to be like the thing that we always share with you. It's not going to have X, Y, and Z in a defined time period. It's going to be this journey we go on together, and here's why.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yes, I love that. So we are at the end of the session. Maybe just to finish here, I would love to ask you, I mean, what advice would you give? I think we said that along the thing, but what would be the first advice you would give to those people venturing in innovate the enterprise? Innovate like the way they are organized, innovate and bring more elements of an organic organization in place. So Michelle, maybe starting with you, going to Rich and Adam.
I think Rich might have said this at the top, but like figuring out where the innovation is coming from and figuring out what the source is now with new ideas, and then first looking there as the place to start. In various companies I've worked in, it was the employees that had the wealth of ideas. So internal events to crowdsource ideas is a good center of energy. And then you end up having people that are your ambassadors for change and for newness. So figuring that out in each organization, I think, is key.
Thank you. Rich?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate the questions that I posed at the upfront. How quickly is innovation happening in your market? What's driving innovation? And then where's that innovation coming from? The advantage that a large corporation has is a lot of creative people are part of that corporation. And if you have a lot of clients, you're touching a lot of different environments, a lot of different companies. And each one of those touch points, in essence, can be, a source for innovation going forward. But I think really when you step back and you think about, where you start with innovation on your journey, how you organize around that, it really gets down to, how quickly is innovation happening? What's driving it, and then where is innovation coming from? And then layer on top of that, some of the conversation we've had here around culture will inform, how quickly and in which directions you can move. And then that'll also inform what you have to do as a company to influence that culture, to nudge it in that right direction.
Love it. Adam, your turn.
Two thoughts. One is just underscoring about talent. I think that, looking for, as Michelle said, the places where this is happening is often about looking for the people who are already doing it and who embody the qualities, experiences, skills, knowledge, and networks that will enable the concept that we're talking about today to be successful in the organization. And that, to me, seems like the linchpin of everything. A last sort of thought that this conversation has prompted me, especially since we're with a bunch of folks who are strategy leaders in their organizations, is that often I think executives in general, and maybe strategy leaders sort of most of all, respond to decentralization as a kind of demotion, a sense of, oh, well, I was planning everything up until now, and now other people are going to plan it, I suppose. What is left? And I would just say it strikes me that really the opposite is true, that it is it puts more onus on leadership to be incredibly specific about how we think that we're going to create value for customers and therefore for the enterprise in such a way that it can, with very limited communication, be picked up by leaders who are much closer to the specific problems we want to solve across the organization. And I think making that distinction to our leaders who are going to embark on this project, not a demotion, actually a promotion and a more of a platform to be increasingly specific and concise is a really important part of success.
I love that. I think it's the best end for this session is how do you promote yourselves to a new software, a new way to operate, how do you build a new way to understand what is a promotion for the organization, not only for yourself. That means you need to think about how you get this demotion, for a new kind of role as a strategy or as an executive. I love that. So That's great. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We end here our session. So Adam, thanks so much. Michelle, thanks so much. Rich, thanks so much. I look forward to collaborating with you next year as well.
Thank you.
Same here. Thank you.
That's great. So we are ending our session today. I want to thank you so much for all of you that joined today. So many insights here. For me, I mean, these tensions that the thought leaders comment about autonomy, alignment, efficiency, adaptability, stability, uncertainty, and how you can play around that, to create like more efficient organization for a constant changing world are key. That's the thing that keeps in my mind all the time. So I want to thank you as well for Thinkers 50 and the Business Ecosystem Alliance to partner with us. For those that don't know these institutions, Thinkers 50 is the only credible ranking of thought leaders that I know. So if you want to see which are the best management thinkers around the world, go to Thinkers 50, go to the website, try to understand more. And the Business Ecosystem Alliance, that is an institution that is looking for this evolution. We are seeing organizations that they are operating more through ecosystems than in isolation. There is a different model to compete, to perceive the world. I would go there to look to all the research and all the things that they are creating. So that these are very interesting things. So, and Outthinker, if you don't know Outthinkers, go to our website. We are a strategy network, an invitation-only strategy network for executives that run strategy in large corporations around the world. More than glad to have a conversation with you if you think it's interesting. So I want to thank you all. I want to thank all the participants, and I will close the event now. Okay. Bye to all. Looking forward to see you again.